The United States Navy's Ford-class Supercarrier program is often touted as the crown jewel of American power projection, a floating fortress designed to dominate the horizons for the next half-century. But behind the PR-friendly imagery of high-speed turns and flight deck operations lies a fiscal reckoning the Pentagon can no longer defer. The price tag for a single hull, the CVN-81, has surged to a staggering $15 billion. To grasp the gravity of that figure, consider that the procurement of this one vessel is now approaching the entire annual defense budget of America's northern neighbor, Canada. While the Navy's mouthpieces continue to champion these ships as the future of sea power, the intersection of rising costs and persistent mechanical failures suggests a program in crisis. For a class originally promised to become more affordable as production matured, the trajectory is not just disappointing, it's a warning sign of systemic procurement failure. The $15 billion learning curve failure. In the world of naval procurement, the learning curve is the holy grail. The theory is simple. As the shipyard masters the construction of a new class, efficiency should rise and costs should fall. The Ford class has effectively demolished this logic. The first-in-class USS Gerald R. Ford, CVN-78, cost roughly $13 billion, nearly double the cost of the final Nimitz-class carrier, the USS George H.W. Bush, CVN-77, even after accounting for inflation. While the second ship, the USS John F. Kennedy, CVN-79, saw a slight dip to $11.3 billion, that relief was a mirage. The third hull, Enterprise, is projected at $12.6 billion, and the yet-to-be-named CVN-81 is slated to leap to just over $15 billion. It is critical to note that these are then-year dollars, and inflation alone cannot account for this massive spike. Furthermore, these staggering figures represent only procurement costs. They do not include the many billions of additional dollars spent on research and development. According to the latest analysis from the Congressional Research Service, CRS, the hope for a downward cost trend is dead. The cost of an American nuclear-powered supercarrier has risen massively with the introduction of the Ford class, and there doesn't appear to be any relief in sight even as the design matures and is reproduced. A hardware identity crisis. The radar logistics orphan. The Ford class is also suffering from a midstream hardware identity crisis that will haunt the Navy's maintenance budgets for decades. The dual-band radar, DBR, originally integrated into the Ford, has proven to be a dead-end system. The Navy is limiting the DBR to only the USS Gerald R. Ford and a truncated version for the 3 Zumwalt-class destroyers. For a defense analyst, this is a red flag. By limiting the DBR to just 4 ships, the Navy has created a logistics orphan, a system with a tiny footprint that will be incredibly expensive to support, upgrade, or find spare parts for in the future. Starting with the Kennedy, the Navy is pivoting to the Enterprise Air Surveillance Radar, EASR. This modular system will be deployed in 2 variants. 3-array variant, intended for static mounting on the Ford-class island. Single rotating array variant, slated for America-class amphibious assault ships and the LXR class. While shifting to a more common radar across the fleet is a logical move, these mid-class design changes further erode the potential for cost savings, as each improvement requires new engineering and integration efforts. Laughably stupid, the risk of postponing shock trials. Perhaps the most egregious example of the program's mismanagement is the decision to postpone critical shock trials. These tests, which involve detonating explosives near the ship to ensure its systems can survive the violent vibrations of combat, have not been fully funded or approved for the CVN-78. Instead, the Navy may foist this requirement onto the second ship in the class, years from now. From a strategic policy perspective, this is a gamble of unprecedented proportions. By the time the Ford design is actually battle-tested for shock, the Navy will likely have committed to or already begun construction on the 4th $15 billion vessel. If a structural flaw is discovered during the trials, the cost of retrofitting 4 multi-billion-dollar hulls would be a financial catastrophe. The assessment of this decision is blunt. This is so laughably stupid and reckless. Realize that the 4th of these vessels could be under construction by the time they shock test the design. Reliability gremlins in the most expensive ship ever built? Despite the record price tag, the Ford class remains plagued by what can only be described as reliability gremlins. The Navy recently requested $62.9 million to address a litany of failures identified during shakedown cruises, a request that exposes the unreliable debacle hidden behind the Navy's optimistic press releases. Key technical failures include advanced weapon elevators, $12.7 million requested to fix continuing technical deficiencies in systems that were supposed to be revolutionary, main thrust bearings, $30 million for tooling and repair following a second failure during sea tests. The Navy has pointedly blamed these failures on manufacturing defects by the contractor. Propulsion supply issues. In May, the carrier was forced back to port shortly after setting sail because it could not provide adequate steam to spin its 4 massive propellers. Voltage regulators. Persistent technical frustrations that continue to hamper the ship's power distribution. There is a glaring lack of available data regarding how these systems are performing against their original threshold requirements. The Navy's refusal to share performance metrics suggests that the most expensive ship ever built is still far from being mission-ready. The 12-ship dream versus fiscal reality. The current debate in Washington focuses on the 12-carrier dream. While the Navy currently operates 10 hulls, defense policy circles and the executive branch have called for a return to 12. However, the CRS report highlights a devastating reality regarding the timeline. Under the current 4-year procurement centers, the Navy wouldn't achieve a sustained 12-carrier force until the 2060s. To reach that goal by the 2030s, the Navy would need to accelerate to 3 or 3.5-year centers, a move that would demand a massive, sustained increase in funding. To lock in this growth, the Navy is pushing for block buys, purchasing materials from multiple carriers at once. While touted as a way to achieve economies of scale, block buys are also a form of Pentagon pork politics. Once a multi-ship contract is signed, it becomes politically radioactive for Congress to cut the program, effectively shielding the Ford class from future budget retractions. Conclusion: the future of the Supercarrier. The Ford class program is at a crossroads where military ambition meets an unsustainable fiscal reality. The current era of generous defense spending, a reprieve from the sequester years, may be an anomaly. If the budget environment shifts toward restraint, these $15 billion behemoths will become a lead weight on the Navy's ability to maintain a flexible fleet. The Navy's own congressionally mandated studies have already begun exploring smaller, less complex, and more affordable carriers as a potential necessity. As the cost of a single ship rivals the defense spending of G7 nations, the question is no longer whether the U.S. wants a mixed fleet of smaller vessels, but whether it can afford to avoid one. Should the U.S. continue to double down on these $15 billion supercarriers, or is it time to admit that the era of the singular, unaffordable behemoth is over?
Enjoyed the episode? Like and subscribe to Military Forces. For more in-depth content, your support helps us create more.